Hi everyone. What I'm wanting to share in this video is how I went about making this concrete yard drain. There's a lot to this. I don't normally use notes when I make videos, but I'm needing to for this specific one because there's an order that's very important to this, and I need to be able to share enough to equip you that if you are wanting to do this project, that you're able to undertake it. I'm going to need to talk some about concrete and the finer points of working with this as a building material. It might not be necessary for everyone, but I'm going to ask that you bear with me as I go through this. So there are 8 key steps. This is a list of them if you want to take a screenshot and use it sort of as your project guide as you navigate through it. You'll see I have a few subpoints as well. It's just to make sure that all the bases are covered and to end up with a quality product. So I want to start by determining the size and shape of your yard drain. I want to be upfront and honest with you. This is actually take 2 with me. I started making the first one and it wasn't going well. The center of it kind of imploded and the weight of the concrete bulged the wood form that I had created. So right there are some of the key lessons that I learned up front, although I've been learning the whole way along. What I ended up deciding to do was using 2 sonotubes, or they're commonly known as builder tubes, for making decks and piers that underpin various structures. So what I decided to do was use a 8-inch center and a 16-inch outside radius of the drain. So that produces a 4-inch wall all the way around, because 16 inches minus 8 inches leaves 8 inches for the walls, and then divide that in half. There's 4 inches on the left side, there's 4 inches on the right side, and it's the same all the way around. It was easiest to work with 2 of these sonotubes, centering the smaller size into the bigger size. Now I did a pile of math when thinking about what was needed, and how I was basing my calculations was on my yard flooding. There was a 3,000 liter or approximately 800 gallon flood in my yard. And so I was looking at a total picture and then wanting to get water below the frost line, where if water froze up here up higher, at least water would be able to get thawed into the ground for where the frost point is where I live. So for this area, 4 out of 5 years is 4 feet below grade, and 1 in 5 years is 5 feet below grade. So I decided on an 8-foot tall yard drain, and 5'8" is below ground, so that gives 8 inches on the 1 in 5 year. That's still going to be below the frost line for water to be absorbing into the ground as the snow melts. And 2 foot 4 inches is above ground. There's a lot of calculations that need to go into this. I filled the center with sand, and that was to make the center strong enough and durable enough to ward off the concrete kind of collapsing and imploding on the center. And it's an extremely important calculation. concrete weighs a lot. Like my total drain weighs 1,300 pounds. So I was thinking through the whole time and working my way backwards of what is structurally needed, as well as the wood that's needed to support as the drain is cast, and then rebar to keep the drain from sort of breaking apart and keep it as one piece, and then to help it withstand the freeze-thaw cycles. And to go along with the freeze-thaw cycles, having strong enough concrete that it just won't break apart and die after 5 years. There's a lot to the concrete mixing. You know, the outdoor temperature, the outdoor humidity, how you protect the drain, or like the concrete while it cures, and keeping the optimum temperature around it. So I can't do the math for you on what you're going to need. I would highly suggest you think about 4-inch walls. The reason I say this is the concrete I used required to be a minimum of 2 inches thick, or it would not stand up to the test of time. So where I had drains placed every 4 inches, it meant that there was actually 3 inch of concrete between them, because it was 4 inches on the center, and the 1/2 inch PVC pipes I used as water inlets angling down into the center would take up the other inch of space. And then that gives a little bit of wiggle room on the walls to be robust and to withstand and sort of be unified as a structure, and being strong enough but light enough in material, if I can say it like that, that it's going to last. I purchased the inside sonotube at my local big box store. The 16-inch one was purchased from a tool rental center. They stock the oversized ones, the ones that aren't sold en masse, the ones that aren't sold for making decks mainly, and basketball nets and mailboxes, but the ones that aren't just coming off the shelf each day through the spring summer construction season. You could feasibly do a 16-inch inside and a 24-inch outside. It's going to depend on the shape of your yard, the water you're trying to fend off, the frost line, and then the volume calculations of the water you're trying to fast track into the ground. You could consider a French drain to be like a dry well. So it's something for you to look up and read more about on your own time. I don't want to spend the time in the video talking about that too much. So after the drain form is decided on, what you're going to use, the next part's putting it together. And the crucial pitfall to avoid is centering the inside piece into the outside. So you'll see in this picture, it kind of looks like the spokes on a bike. I used 8 pieces of 1/4-inch threaded rod at both ends to center the 8 inches sonotube into the 16-inch sonotube. It took all 8 to take the wiggle out of the inside and the outside where it was solid. Now, if you start using larger ones than what I've talked about, you're going to need to up the 1/4-inch threaded rod. The threaded rod needs to be able to support the weight of the inside sonotube if that's what you end up using. Where this becomes, or where this may sort of twist your mind, is sonotubes are made out of cardboard. It's just the volume of it and the thickness of it that warrants the heavier gauge threaded rod. So if you're going above a 16-inch sonotube, I would highly suggest you consider using a 1/2 inch threaded rod for the spokes. And what I did was put one in approximately every 3 inches or so. So I basically made the sonotube like a piece of pie. Down the middle, in the cross, that's 4 pieces, and then on the diagonals, and that gives the total of 8 pieces. And if you're going to go bigger, then you want to go to maybe 12 and just keep spreading the weight out so that the sonotube won't tear on you. I used 1/2-inch PVC for the water inlets. I did a lot of very precise math when making the form and then putting it together. The 1/2-inch PVC requires roughly a 1-inch hole, so I purchased a wood spade drill bit for drilling in the cardboard, and then the holes were 4 inches on center. If I was to do this over again, I would put the lowest hole on one side at 4 inches, and then the next side would be 5 inches, 6 inches on the third side, and 7 inches on the fourth side, so that regardless of what water level is at, it can easily get into the center if the top is frozen and still find its way in and below the frost line to be absorbed into the ground. So I ended up using a ratchet cutter for the PVC, or a tube cutter. The ratchets really focus their strength all at one point. So when you're squeezing the handle, you're really focusing all the pressure on that one spot, and it makes a clean cut. I made the pieces 5 inches long, so the one side was flush with the outer part of my yard drain form, the 16-inch sonotube, and then the inner part had about 1 inch left over. And how I held them in place was with transparent silicone, but just doing one side at a time so the silicone could cure to hold those pieces in place as it was all prepared all the way around. After all 4 sides were in and the silicone was cured, the next part of this was putting duct tape over them just to give the edges a bit more strength to withstand the weight of the concrete being poured into the center of it and not having them come free and knock loose on you. When the form is together and you've got it in the hole, the next part of it is leveling it. And I can't undermine the value of using a 4-inch level. Like having it long enough so you can see with the level what you need to do with the yard drain in getting it level both left to right and then front to back. Because you can have it level this way, but it still be tilted on the other plane. Spend your time leveling it. Make it worth your while. When you go to all this effort to measure where the holes are on the inside and the outside, but then if it's level, if it's not level, the water's not going to flow into the center of the yard drain as you've designed it to do so. After you've got the form in place and it's leveled, you need to start securing it. So the concrete requires wood supports, bottom, middle, and top. And then if you're going to do what I did with the French drain, you're going to also want to ratchet the top so that the weight of it is still supported while it's backfilled with drainage gravel. Now, if you're just doing a yard drain and basically like a dry well, you won't need the wood support because the ground around you will be augured out with whatever size outer sonotube you're using, and you're good. But for the French drain, you have to also support it, and you need to spend some considerable time working out the appropriate support so you won't have the concrete fall over on you and make an absolute mess, and then required it to all be jackhammered out. Before I started pouring the concrete, I filled the center with sand about a third of the way up. And then I kind of went a little bit of concrete, a little bit more sand. Concrete, sand, just to keep it balanced, not have the center explode instead of imploding. I used a black garbage bag, 3 of them taped vertically, to keep the sand dry before it was going to be vacuumed out. The garbage bag was a really bad idea. I mean, it sucked great for the first 3 feet, but then the problem that I ran into was the vacuum cleaner getting stuck on the garbage bag, and I had to have the sand vacuumed out of the sides of the yard drain. It was considerably slower than it had to be. It'd be much easier vacuuming down a few feet, and if it got wet, wait a day or 2 for it to dry, go down some more, and take it over a few days to make your life a lot easier than mine. I do want to remind you there is extreme value in the weather forecast, and also about vibrating the concrete as it's poured. So I don't want you to get so sidetracked on the weather that you forget about vibrating the concrete. When you're pouring concrete, it forms little air bubbles. So the vibration is to get those air bubbles up and gone. It's an extremely important step. It's best to vibrate as you mix up the concrete. Like if you're mixing it yourself in a wheelbarrow, concrete goes in, vibrate that little bit, and just keep on doing it as you work your way up. What you're wanting to do is get the concrete settled, and you'll know you have a good vibration if there's a thin layer of water on top. If you over vibrate, you'll actually take the water out of the concrete, and you're going to have weak concrete as a result. It's extremely important for those of you who are using this in a French drain application that before you take the outside of the concrete form off, that you leave it enclosed for 14 days so the concrete reaches 80% strength. It's equally important that you have the top covered with a little bit of water, so a plastic garbage bag with a little bit of water on it, and maybe you make a dam with some 2x4s around the top so the water will stay there. Because if the water is evaporating too quickly, that's the strength of your concrete zapping away from you. I went one step further. I made a really loose base with duct tape for my yard drain so that the concrete was sealed at the bottom, it was sealed on the sides with duct tape, and it had that on the top. So it's just going to be a slow and steady the evaporation as the concrete got hydrated, so I'd have the maximum strength possible. You know, we're talking about your safety, and if a child gets up onto this, keeping the child safe, and especially protecting a child if they don't know better. So the 14-day time period is the minimum. You could extend that to 28 days if it's significantly larger than what I've used. I would highly suggest you speak to someone that's knowledgeable about concrete for more details about the mixing and the vibrating and the curing process. Use the bag of premixed concrete as your initial education. Then look online for the manufacturer's product information PDF. Read it over so you've got some base of knowledge, and then if you go to talk to someone, you can either have questions answered, or you'll be able to pose questions to that individual to make sure that you understand. It would be even worthwhile going to a concrete facility near where you live and paying them for an hour consultation to go over pre-mixed concrete and how you go about it doing yourself. Because the whole project really hinges on the strength of that concrete and doing it right. My next step was removing the outer form. The reason I needed to do that was because of when the cardboard would break down naturally, it was going to create a sinkhole because of the volume of cardboard. So I wanted that off, and a vibrating tool sort of cut through it. It's not an angle grinder, it's much more gentle, but it's just vibrating so it tears away at the cardboard that is the sonotube. And then finally, applying 3 layers of foundation sealer. So foundation sealer is about waterproofing and giving a barrier between the concrete and the water you're jettisoning that's sort of feeding in from the sides. And it has to do with maximizing the length of the service life of the concrete. And again, find out details about it. Read the can that you buy at the big box store, then find the product's information sheet from the manufacturer, read it over, and then understand it and ask questions to understand it. You'll end up with a good product if you follow this and you work hard at it. And this is one of those cases where the effort you put in will produce your results. I hope this has been enough of an overview that a do-it-yourselfer could grab the concept and run with it. I'm willing to answer some questions in the comments. I would like to be able to repeat answering myself multiple questions. So I would ask you to read through what discussion has happened as a result of this video and kind of go from there and learn and make this a community effort. And if you've done this, share your tips, especially for others to glean and improve. I want to thank you for this time you spent with me today. I have really enjoyed this project, and there's a practical need dealing with the spring thaw here at my home. Thanks for this time, and thank you for being part of the journey that I've had with this. Take care. Bye for now.